Yo! Welcome back to One More Mana. My name's Derek, and despite the negative thoughts that Seth and Ken may have had about the legendary creatures in M20, I'm still coming back at you with some more deck text for them, because while I do agree with them at some points, I do think they are at least fun to brew with. Now, in practice, we'll see how they all work out, but I've had a lot of fun brewing with them. And this week, we're looking at Yarok the Desecrated. Yarok is 2 in Sultai, so black, green, blue, for a 3/5 Death Touch, life linking, elemental, weird looking dude. I really don't know what, looking at the art now, I really don't know what's going on there. It's a tree elemental. It's very spiny. But yeah, not really sure what's going on there. That's not the important part though. What it is a Panharmonicon on a stick, but better. Basically, whenever a permanent entering the battlefield causes the ability or triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, it triggers twice. Now, the huge and most important difference here with Panharmonicon is that Panharmonicon only works for artifacts and creatures. And that is a big difference. Essentially with Panharmonicon, that was specifically just for creature ETBs or, artifact stuff triggering. It's kind of self-explanatory, but, creature ETBs was really what I saw it used for the most part. And not that you can't use that for this guy, for Yarok, but with Yarok, I feel like if you wanted to do creature ETBs, especially in Sultai, why not just do Muldrotha? It doesn't trigger them twice, but you can just keep replaying them every turn for so much value. I feel like this opens up a different strategy that I've actually been running in Sultai for a while, and that's landfall. I've had, on and off throughout the last couple years, I've been running a Damia landfall deck just because Sultai is so good in those colors. And she sort of fit, but Yarok just fits it perfectly. Essentially, it just doubles all your landfall triggers. And with landfall, you're already getting a lot of triggers. Sometimes, you can get easily 10 landfall triggers in a turn with some of the stuff we got in here. And to double that even more, you can have some crazy stuff happening. Alright, so we're going to look at the creatures first. We're running a mix. We are going to have some ETBs. There's going to be some stuff to take advantage of the Panharmonicon likeness of this creature. But I'm not going to focus on that. There's a lot of decks focusing on that. I want to look at the landfall. So the first one we're going to talk about is Avenger of Zendikar. Not really a creature nobody's seen before. This isn't a lot of decks, but that landfall trigger is crazy. Most of the time when I play an Avenger, I just want a lot of tokens. I'm not really concerned with how big they are. I'm trying to combine it with the Crater Hoof or something like that. But in this deck with all the landfall, all of a sudden, those little plants get real big, real fast. And because of the numbers, it doesn't matter if they don't have trample. You're going to have so many giant creatures, you can just smack people. This next card isn't landfall, but it cares so much about lands, and it's so perfect, and it's Multani. Multani is so broken. If y'all haven't had a chance to try Multani in a deck that ramps a lot or a graveyard synergized deck, you got to give it a try. It is insane because it gets +1/+1 for each land that you control and in your graveyard. And when you, with some of the ramp spells, play a escape shift, which we'll get to later, Multani gets out of hand so fast. And the craziest thing is you just keep bringing it back. If it gets in your graveyard, you get 2 lands back to your hand, which we want because that just gives us more landfall triggers. This card does everything we want to do, and it has reach and trample just thrown on top of it. This is the type of card in a deck like this that will either serve as a finisher or scare everybody enough to kill you. I guess it's got pros and cons to it. Probably my favorite landfall creature is Royal Elemental. This thing is crazy. It's got the landfall ability of stealing other people's creatures and doubling it. This literally just dropping 1 land with this has a huge impact on the board because you're stealing someone's creature. If you have your commander out stealing 2 creatures, if someone doesn't deal with it, essentially nobody's going to be playing creatures because you're just going to take them all. And we have ways to get lands into play at instant speed, meaning instant speed, steal people's creatures. That sounds like it could be fun. The next 2 fit into a similar category. It's going to be Tatiova and Tireless Tracker. This is just going to draw so many cards. Tatiova, obviously, every time a land comes in, why not draw 2 cards, gain 2 life? That doesn't sound too bad. That's broken. That's insane, especially because we can draw into more lands and we have lots of effects that let us play more than 1 land per turn, and we can just keep playing more lands and drawing more cards and gaining more life. Tatiova is a broken commander. It's broken in almost any deck it's in, but when you double that ability, it gets even more out of hand. And Tireless Tracker is going to do something similar. Tireless Tracker is going to landfall, make clues, so we can get a whole bunch of clues. And it almost functions as like a less broken Thrasios in a lot of ways. I play it in a deck with Thrasios as the commander, and it's almost like a second commander in that deck because you get the landfall, then you get that little clue, you just pay 2, sack it, draw a card, and being able to pay colorless mana like that to draw cards is amazing. And with all those clues we'll be getting and all the mana we'll have, basically just keep drawing cards as much as you want. Now, a creature that isn't landfall in this deck that I just love is Sire of Stagnation. And basically what it's saying is, look, I'm going to play a lot of lands. I'm going to get a ton of advantage. You're not going to do the same. It's essentially just building out the fact that we get so much advantage with all the ramp in this deck and trying to stop opponents from doing that. And if they decide to play their lands, they're exiling cards and we're drawing cards. Even if people go ahead and only miss a couple land drops a piece in a deck like this where you're ramping so hard, that advantage could be game changing. And if they want to play lands, put us draw a bunch of cards. I think we're okay with that too. Looking at the instance, there's two all-stars in this deck. One is Constant Mists. If you have any deck that is going to recur lands or wants lands in the graveyard or just has a lot of lands, even if you're just playing green, forget it. If you're playing green, play Constant Mist. This card is insane. You can just fog, sack a land, bring it back, and then fog again. And essentially, it's only going to cost you. You can, for 3 lands per round at the table, fog everything. And in a deck where you're getting so many lands into play and can recur them, it doesn't even matter. Essentially, you're just saying no combat damage. And cards like this are a huge reason why people say to put non-combat win conditions, because this can get out of hand and it's really just annoying. It's really tough to deal with. The next one is Crop Rotation. This is almost, I use it for a similar reason. One, it's going to give us that land sack trigger. We are running a card like Titania, so sacking lands, sometimes we're just going to net us, tokens or something else. Or Gitrog, it might even net us card draw. But in this, the best part about it is instant speed tutoring for a land. And different decks want different lands in these situations. But the reason I use it 99% of the time is to go get Glacial Chasm. And essentially, it's doing the same thing that Constant Mist is doing. Someone tries to attack you, you can Crop Rotation, sack a land, bring Glacial Chasm in at instant speed and stop combat damage from happening. And it's so hard to deal with because unless they're able to counter that, it's similar to the Constant Mist where it's a constant effect. You're going to keep that Glacial Chasm out and land destruction is minimal. So again, you get to a point where people just can't do combat damage to you. And at instant speed for 1 green mana, is crazy. Not to mention, you still get a landfall trigger from it too. Look at the artifacts. The first one, Amulet of Vigor, is great because a lot of the green ramp spells, especially the bigger ones, are going to come put in our lands tapped. That won't matter. If they enter and untap, all of a sudden we get access to so much more mana. And we need those landfall triggers and then be able to use that mana for other stuff in addition. That's where you can get to some broken turns and win the game like that. And another card I love is Horn of Greed. This is one of those cards. It is a universal effect, but the thing is you're going to benefit from it so much more that it won't matter. You're just getting more value than everybody else. You have so many lands. You have so many abilities to play more than one land a turn. And it specifically does say play a land. So this is not going to be the type of deal where ETB trigger, you get to draw it, so the ramp's not going to do it. It doesn't really synergize with a lot of the landfall effects, so to speak, but we're running a ton of lands. We have lots of extra land per turn effects. And hey, if we're drawing a few cards a turn from it, everybody else is only drawing 1. I don't know. I consider that a win. I realize it's risky. Some people may not like to run it, but I love this card. Looking at the enchantments, the first one I'll talk about is Exploration. This is a whole category of cards like this. I guess I've kind of been skipping over them to this point, but we are running the Azusa's, obviously the Exploration, the Oracle Moldias, the Wayward Swordtooths, all those type of cards, so we can just get as many land drops per turn as possible. Polluted Bonds is another card I love, and it's very similar to the Sire of Stagnation I just talked about. Essentially, we're going to be punishing other people while we're benefiting from making all these land drops. We're telling other people, slow down a little bit. We don't want you ramping as hard as we are. We don't want you getting all those lands into play. And it does a great job of that. If they want to play lands, you're just going to slowly bring down their life total and raise ours. Perfect. And if they don't want to deal with that and they don't want to play lands, we get so much incremental advantage over time that it's putting us in a position to basically be able to overpower the board. Another one I love is Retreat to Coralheim. This is such a cool card. It lets you tap or untap target creature with a landfall trigger. Now, I'm sure you can do some broken infinite type stuff with this, especially with the doubling of the landfall abilities on our commander. I'm not even thinking about all that. All I know is we have some ways to get lands into play at instant speed. We already talked about Crop Rotation. Even a card like Thrasios can get a landfall trigger at instant speed. And be able to tap things down at instant speed is amazing. And I love it in this deck because we have versatility. If we want to untap stuff to leave up blockers, we can tap down attackers. Lots of different things we can do. And I love what it lets us do both during our turn and on other people's turns. Looking at the sorceries, any type of land deck you want, it's the big 3 essentially for this deck. It's going to be Scape Shift, Life from the Loam, and Splendid Reclamation. You get any combination. Oh my gosh, Life from the Loam is it's a ridiculous card. I love this card. I put it in I would put it in as many decks as possible. It's just one of those things that even you don't have graveyard synergies, dredging away stuff so you can just keep recasting, getting lands to hand. Man, it just helps you hit land drops. It is so good. And when you combine that with something like Escape Shift, where, let me pick all the lands I want and then just life them back. Or even better, Splendid Reclamation to bring them all back. With Escape Shift or Splendid Reclamation, you get so many landfall triggers. That is enough to win the game a lot of time. Imagine doubling that. Some of these abilities are crazy when you get them in this high of amounts. A lot of times landfall triggers, when you look at them, you're thinking, okay, land for turn, do this, do that. You get the incremental value. But with cards like this, it can explode, and you can, out of nowhere, either win the game or just create such an insane board state that it's essentially a ticking time bomb. They don't deal with it. Your opponents are just going to die. Another one I'll talk about in a very similar category, Boundless Realms. This is an amazing card. And something I like about this is it kind of makes you build decks with more basics if you're going to run a card like this. Now, there's nothing wrong with running almost all non-basic lands. But there's also nothing wrong with running a lot of basics. And I feel like I know this a lot as a deck builder. I'll kind of get too excited of just never running basics. And half the time I end up just spending too much money on a mana base that would work perfectly fine if I just ran more basics in it. Wouldn't suffer almost at all. And this is one of those cards that encourages me to, okay, this is a crazy ramp effect. You're going to get a whole bunch of lands into play, all these landfall triggers, everything we want. But you need to make sure you have enough basics in the deck to make it worth it. And I don't know. It's something that kind of helps me tweak my deck building. Because to put a card like this in it, you do need to have a good number of basics. And it kind of helps me get a little bit less greedy with my mana base. Now looking at the lands, we're running 42 lands. We're going to be running a lot of lands. I think you could actually even go higher if you wanted. This is kind of the happy medium I found, especially with my experience of running this deck with Damia at the head. I felt like 42 was a happy medium. And now there's a lot of directions you can take these lands. If you want to make this the lands matter type deck that's tutoring for specifics, and you want the, Dark Depths, Thespian stage type stuff, and you want Urborg Cabal coffers, and you want all these land combos with, ramp that's going to tutor for those lands, great. You can go ahead and do that, and I think the deck would be awesome for it. I'm kind of going more in the direction where I'm just running a lot of basics and just basically lands that are going to be tapping for mana, because I want to get tons of lands into play. I want ramp effects like the Boundless Realms, like Escape Shift. I want to be ramping lots of lands as opposed to very particular lands. So most of it's just going to be mana producing. The one land that isn't mana producing that I think is one of the most important ones in the deck is Glacial Chasm. And I mentioned this earlier. This card alone will make me make sure that I put land removal in every deck I play because it is that broken. If someone gets it into play, a lot of games, people might not have access to land removal throughout the entirety of the game. People might only have one piece per deck, and that's if you're lucky. And this gets out, you only lose. That cumulative upkeep doesn't even matter, essentially, because you might get 4 or 5 turns of not being able to take damage before you start getting low enough for that to matter. And if you can go 4 or 5 turns without having to worry about protecting yourself, of most decks you're going to be able to set up a win. And especially in this one, they can't deal with it. They can't put pressure on you. You get in this spot really just to win the game. All right, so that's kind of the basics of the buildup of the deck. Now we're going to get to, obviously, the most important part. How are we going to win with all this? The deck itself seems very simple. It's literally, like I said, just landfall. We're just playing a bunch of stuff that gets lands into play, playing a bunch of cards that benefit from lands coming into play. But how is this going to win the game? We can't just throw all our lands at somebody and then the game's over. Or maybe we can. And the reason I'm saying we can is because there's a card Sylvan Awakening. And with some of the ramp in this deck, so there's times you might just feel like you're dumping all of the lands in the deck onto the battlefield, especially with the cards like I talked about before. You might have all your basics in play in a given game, and being able to turn those all into indestructible creatures that are smacking people, essentially you are just throwing all your lands at people's faces and killing them. Now the next way to win the game is going to be something that takes direct advantage of our commander a little bit more, and that's Ob Nixilis the Fallen. Ob Nixilis the Fallen is insane. It has a landfall ability that when a land enters, it gets 3+1/+1 counters, and target opponent loses 3 life. This is insane. This is ridiculous. Essentially, with our commander out, that's play a land, someone loses 6 life for 1 land. This is, I'm running out of words. I can't even talk right. This is ridiculous. You play a Boundless Realms when this is out, someone is dead, and maybe more than one person. And that's not even considering our commander doubling all of that. And this thing's going to get massive. This is obviously, you probably saw when I skipped it earlier, a landfall deck obviously needs this card in it if it's a landfall deck with black in it. This is so broken, and this is a really good way. It's threatening, so obviously if you get it out, A lot of the times we're going to be ramping on, you want to be able to play this and that mass landfall effect in the same turn, because nobody's going to let this sit on the table, because especially if your commander's out and they see that double effect coming, they're going to use everything they can to get it off the board. Another way to win the game is going to be to take advantage of the tokens. We have a lot of creatures that create tokens. I mentioned Titania earlier. You have a card like Rampaging Baloths, or you have a card like Avenger of Zendikar. There are lots of different landfall abilities or lands leaving the battlefield abilities that can create tokens. And the best payoff that I know with all these tokens is Triumph for the Hordes. No surprise here though, there's creatures, combat might be involved, Infect's going to be involved also. And the last way I'll say to realistically win the game in this deck is to take advantage of all this mana. The whole point of the deck and taking advantage of the commander is getting all these landfall triggers, and that's what I wanted to use this commander for. But at the end of the day, you're going to end up with tons of lands on the battlefield, and sometimes, just maybe, you get that Avenger of Zendikar, get all these landfall triggers, someone board wipes. You get that Obnixilis out, you go to play a bunch of lands, in response someone kills it. And all of a sudden, you might lose your landfall creator. All of a sudden, you might not have all those landfall creatures anymore. You might not be able to find them, and you just have tons of lands in play. We want payoff for that, and we got some options. In this deck, I want to run Villainous Wealth. I love Villainous Wealth. If you can get all this insane amount of mana into play, blow it all into Villainous Wealth, you can go for the mill route. Honestly, you can see if you can mill somebody. But more realistically, you can easily get an X's, 10, 15, maybe even 20 with all the lands that we're going to be getting into play. And all the value you get off of that, being able to cast a quarter of someone's deck almost sometimes, a lot of the time, that's going to win you the game. And if it doesn't win it for you, at least you're going to have a whole lot of fun trying to. If you want a more reliable win cons in this slot, you can go with an Exsanguinator or Torment of Hailfire. I just think Villainous Wealth is a lot more fun in this slot, because you don't know what's going to happen. You might hit something amazing, you might not. But if you wanted a more reliable win con, I would throw an Exsanguinator Sentinels in there. And that's going to do it for this deck. I really, really do want to see everybody else's builds. Please let me know what you guys think. I do think this is a really cool opportunity. If people, a lot of the time, I know when I first started building commander decks, my first thought was to kind of build directly around the commander. And while this deck is definitely very synergistic with the commander, it can very, very easily run without it. The landfall synergies in general are so powerful that you won't need your commander out for the deck to work. But when the commander is out, the level of explosiveness with some of these cards is just insane. It's a different way of playing. Just like there's different deck styles, I think the level of reliance on commanders is something that will really vary the type of decks you're playing, and it's something to kind of take a look at. But yes, as always, we love and appreciate all the patrons so much. We really, really do. Please let me know what everybody thinks. Let me know some of your ideas for Yarok. Let me know what in the world it's supposed to be other than, I think it's just some like prickly plant. Like one of those things I remember, you climb in certain bushes and all of a sudden you get stabbed and you come out like those like rose thorn things. Maybe that's what's supposed to be. I don't know. Elemental seems kind of vague to me. Let me know. Would love to hear what you guys think. And until then, I will see you guys next time.